On Thanksgiving, my sister rose from her chair, tapped her wine glass like she was stepping up to a podium, and made her big announcement. Mom and Dad are giving me the house. Emily gets nothing. The place exploded. Applause, whistles. Someone even shouted, finally. I didn't move, didn't even blink. I simply smiled. The kind of smile you wear when a storm rolls in, and you already know the shelter isn't yours. I gently placed my fork down. Dad, I said quietly. Should I be the one to explain it, or will you? His face lost all its color. Jenna went rigid. In that frozen second, everyone realized something was about to detonate. Before I tell you what followed that heavy silence, I want to ask, where are you listening from tonight? It helps, knowing others have survived families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan, and if you had met my family before that Thanksgiving, you might have thought we were tight-knit. That cheerful Midwestern postcard vibe, coordinated outfits, forced holiday smiles in front of the tree, pretending we never raised our voices. But families like mine don't shatter with screams. They fracture quietly, in tiny decisions in who is heard and who fades into the background. And for as long as I can remember, I've lived in that quiet place, only seen when someone needed something from me. Jenna, the younger one, never lived there. She was the golden child. Loud, magnetic, impossible to overlook. The relative everyone gushes over, calling her a star, a firecracker. I never resented her for it. I just figured out early that if I wanted a future, I'd have to build it myself, because nothing would ever just land in my hands like it did in hers. As kids, I watched my parents shower Jenna with opportunities, like she needed constant tending. Dance lessons, camps, private coaching. The same things I was told were too expensive when I asked. Years later, when I moved to Chicago for a career, they labeled it selfish. Like choosing independence was the same as abandoning them. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed nearby, slipping perfectly into the role they tailored for her. Still, I kept coming home for the holidays, mostly for my grandmother, Evelyn Nolan, sharp as a blade, silver hair, the only one who ever looked at me with genuine pride. When she wrapped her arms around me at the door, it didn't feel forced. It felt like someone finally noticed me. She would brush her fingers against my cheek, murmur something like, "You're tougher than they give you credit for." Then she'd sink back into her seat as if she hadn't just given me enough strength to keep going for another year. Thanksgiving felt wrong before it even started. The atmosphere inside the house was off, heavy, anticipating something. Like everyone had been let in on a secret. Everyone except me. Mom was zipping around the kitchen with that strained grin she uses when she's covering something up. Dad barely looked in my direction, and if he did, it was only for a heartbeat. Jenna kept fussing over imaginary lint on her dress, though it was already perfect. And then, when I stepped into the dining room, I noticed something else. The chair that always sat beside mine. It wasn't moved. It wasn't tucked somewhere else. It was just gone. That should have told me everything. You'd think the missing chair would have been a loud enough clue. But in my family, the warnings always whisper before they blow up. I sat anyway, smoothing out the napkin across my knees, pretending I didn't see how every conversation dropped into silence the moment I appeared. They'd pause, like someone hit mute, then restart with too bright laughter as soon as I walked past. Jenna drifted around the room like the grand marshal of her own parade, adjusting forks by a millimeter, rearranging the centerpiece, murmuring little suggestions to Mom that made them both smirk. Now and then, she'd flash me a courtesy smile, tight empty, like I was a colleague she barely liked. It wasn't always this way. Once, we were just sisters sharing a room, slipping notes under the door after bedtime. She used to braid my hair, steal my hoodies, and beg me to drive her everywhere once I got my license. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, something changed. She settled seamlessly into the role my parents carved out for her, the flawless, shining daughter. And I slowly faded out of the picture. The house situation didn't start on Thanksgiving. The first rumble came 6 months earlier. A sticky June Saturday. Mom had called, asking me to come home. Said it was important. No explanation. No hint. The moment I arrived, they directed me to the dining table. the same place where everything would unravel later. Dad had a folder laid out like he was pitching a business deal. Mom was smiling so wide it looked painful. "Sweetheart," Dad began, "we're refinancing the house. Just a quick signature, better rates. You don't need to worry about a thing." Even as the words left his mouth, a knot tightened in my chest. My family never asked for help lightly. There was always more beneath the surface than they admitted. I leafed through the stack of papers, my heart hammering as I tried to decode the numbers. Something felt wrong. Too many pages, too many figures blacked out, too many rushed explanations. "Can I take these with me?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "My lawyer can review them." The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Mom's smile wavered. Dad snapped the folders shut with a sharpness that hinted at regret, as if showing me the papers had been a mistake. "It's just a formality," he insisted. "Why make it complicated?" I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer flipped through the documents, her eyebrows rising with each page. No smile, no hesitation. The next morning, she called. "This isn't a refinance," she said. "It's a transfer of liability. If you sign, you become responsible for their debt." "Debt?" I stared at the phone, stunned. "What debt?" She explained slowly, carefully. "A second mortgage, months of missed payments, foreclosure notices. Things I had never known existed." And the moment it clicked, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, steadier, more deliberate. 2 months later, Dad called again, this time asking for money. Not a loan, not help. Money. He said it was for Mom's medical bills. But when I offered to pay the hospital directly, the story fell apart. The truth seeped out. Late payments, deadlines missed, desperation. Now, sitting at the Thanksgiving table, watching Jenna bask in everyone's attention, the weight of those 2 months pressed against me. They weren't giving her the house. They were giving her the debt. And they expected me to sit quietly beside her while it happened. By the time November came, the secret between my parents and me was like a live wire. We never spoke about the papers I had refused to sign, or the call where Dad admitted the truth. Our conversation shrank to weather, work updates, small talk, as if chit-chat could cover a widening chasm. They had no idea I had done more than say no. I had pulled the property records myself. I knew about the second mortgage, the interest devouring them, the foreclosure clock ticking. They were drowning, and trying to drag someone else under with them. At first, I assumed that someone was always meant to be me. I was the one with the stable job in Chicago, no kids, the safe harbor they thought they deserved. Saying no felt like learning a new language laced with guilt. Then Jenna began dropping hints online. Captions about big changes, photos on the front porch with our parents, jokes about being ready to own a home. Every post felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. A week before Thanksgiving, Mom called, practically bubbling over with excitement, talking about how thrilled Jenna was to host more often once the house situation was resolved. She spoke lightly, as if the house were a cherished keepsake rather than a ticking time bomb wrapped neatly in ribbon. That night, I finally stopped hoping they'd fix things on their own. I went to my desk, pulled out a folder, and began filling it. Copies of overdue payments, formal notices, summary sheets laying bare exactly how deep the trouble ran. My goal wasn't to shame them. It was to make sure no one could claim ignorance about what they were stepping into. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove back with the folder tucked in my bag and a tight knot in my stomach. Part of me still hoped they'd pull me aside, admit the plan had gone too far. But instead, Mom met me at the door with a tense hug, smelling of perfume and strained politeness. "You look beautiful," she said. "Jenna is going to be so happy you're here." The way she said Jenna told me everything. Inside, the dining room was perfectly set. Extra leaves in the table, glasses catching the light, every chair filled except mine. My grandmother caught my gaze from her usual seat and gave me a small, knowing nod, like she held secrets she wasn't ready to share. Sliding into my spot, my hand brushed against the edge of my bag. Paper against canvas, proof against denial. If they wanted to turn this dinner into a show, I was done being the quiet extra. When my sister rose and tapped her glass, I already knew the curtain was about to rise on a performance they'd rehearsed without me. Jenna stood radiant, hair perfectly curled, the necklace from our grandmother glinting in the light as if it had been chosen just for this moment, ready to steal the scene. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me, she announced, her voice bright and carrying across every plate and every glass. Emily gets nothing. The room erupted before the words could even fully sink in. Cheers, applause, whistles, the kind of laughter people use when they think they're celebrating something noble. Someone slapped Dad on the back. Mom dabbed at her eye, as if witnessing a wedding. I didn't touch my glass. I didn't even blink. I just looked at Jenna and smiled. Not a warm smile, not an easy one, but the kind that carries all the weight of everything you're not saying yet. I set my fork down on my plate and looked at Dad. Should I tell them, or will you? The moment my words landed, it was like someone had flipped a switch. The room plunged into a thick, tangible silence. So still I could hear the radiator clicking. Dad's hand wavered, and his fork clanged against the plate, the metallic sound bouncing off the walls. Jenna's face tightened. Tell us what? Around us, relatives leaned in, noses and ears tuned for any sign of drama. My grandmother let out a sharp breath, like she'd been silently waiting for someone, anyone, to call out the pretense of normalcy. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and set it in front of me. I didn't open it yet. I let it rest there, a silent threat. Before you start celebrating Jenna getting the house, I said in a calm voice, you should probably know its condition. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came. Emily isn't here. Why not? I asked. You didn't hesitate to hand it over to her without mentioning the debt. Were you embarrassed then? Heads turned. Conversations froze midair. Jenna stiffened as if someone had tightened a string inside her. What debt? She snapped. I finally opened the folder. A neat stack of bills, overdue notices, and payment records stared back at us. I slid a page forward, highlighting the summary line in bold. They're behind on payments, I said, on 2 mortgages. The second was taken out without telling anyone. They're months from foreclosure. Maybe weeks. My mother gasped into her hand. Dad's face flushed red. Jenna's eyes widened as if she'd been struck. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. They would have told me. I held her gaze. Did they tell you? I asked steadily, that the house comes with over $100,000 in debt? That if you sign those papers, you're responsible for every overdue payment and penalty. Her expression cracked. A flicker of doubt entered. Dad tried again, his voice strained. You're making this sound worse than it is, Emily. We're handling it. Are you? I countered, holding up another page. Because this one says the bank isn't convinced you're capable of handling anything. He lunged forward, like he could snatch the paper straight from my hands in front of 20 witnesses. I jerked it back before he could touch it. Stop, Mom begged. Please not today. Why not? I asked. You chose today. The relatives shifted in their seats. Some fidgeted uneasily. Others leaned forward, curious, and a few glared openly, furious at being dragged into a scene they hadn't expected. Aunt Diane spoke first. Daniel, she said sharply, is this true? Dad didn't answer. His jaw was so tight I worried it might crack. Mom pressed her face into her napkin. Jenna looked back and forth between them and me, searching for some sign, but they said the house was mine. It was never a gift, I murmured. It was a way out for them. They needed someone to shoulder the debt. At first, they tried to trick me. When that failed, they chose you. Jenna froze in her sequin dress, trembling. Her fiancé, Tyler, leaned back slightly, unsure if he wanted to be connected to this at all. Are they lying? He asked. Mom sobbed. Dad didn't look up. That was all Tyler needed. He pushed his chair back and stood. You told me the house was paid off. You promised us a fresh start. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. You expect me? He said, his voice shaking between anger and disbelief, to start a life on a sinking ship. Tyler, please. He shook his head. I'm not marrying into this. The room collectively gasped as he strode past the turkey, past my stunned parents, and out the front door without a backward glance. Jenna's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, hands shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks. For the first time in years, She looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. This isn't my fault, she whispered. I didn't know. I know, I said quietly. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You ruined everything. I stared at him. No. You ruined everything the moment you tried to pass your debt to your kids like it was an inheritance. You're tearing this family apart, Mom. It was already broken, I said. I'm just refusing to keep sweeping the pieces under the rug. A low murmur rippled among the relatives. Disappointment, judgment. The kind that cuts deeper because everyone saw it happen. My grandmother rose slowly, gripping the table for support. Her voice, though frail, carried more weight than anyone else's. I raised you better than this, she said to my father. Your daughters aren't lifeboats for you to cling to. Dad recoiled. Mom's sobs grew louder. Jenna finally lifted her gaze toward me, eyes empty. What do I do now? The word struck deeper than she intended. Not because I had the solution, but because she was finally asking the right person. Not the parents who had fed her illusions, but the sister they had shoved aside. Before I could answer, there was a sharp knock at the door. Every head turned. The knock came again, louder this time. Dad frowned, and when the door opened, a woman stepped in. Plain suit, badge on her belt, calm, unreadable. Mr. and Mrs. Nolan, she asked. I need to speak with you regarding your mortgage records. The room erupted in disbelief. Mom nearly collapsed. Dad went pale. Jenna gripped the table as if it was her only anchor. I stayed still, breathing evenly, watching the truth finally land in the right place. Why is she here? Dad whispered, voice breaking. The investigator didn't flinch. We received a report of potential financial misconduct. I have a few questions. You could have heard a pin drop. No one cheered. Emily, Mom begged. Please tell her you misunderstood. I didn't answer. Not yet. The truth was just beginning to surface. As the investigator walked through the house, everything holding my parents' carefully crafted facade together began to crumble. She asked precise, measured questions about payments, overdue notices, the second mortgage, and every evasion made the room shrink. Relatives inched away as if from fire. Jenna sat still, hands trembling in her lap. She wasn't angry anymore. She was drained, as if the color had been sucked from her. My grandmother rested a steady hand on her shoulder, silent, unyielding. When the investigator finally left with the documents, a heavy silence fell. Mom reached for me. Dad muttered that I'd humiliated them. Neither blame nor apology made a dent. I picked up my coat. Don't go, Jenna whispered. I'll still be here. I told her, just not for their lives anymore. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My parents had to face the web of secrets, excuses, and debt they'd spun over the years. The house went on the market. They moved into a small apartment across the city, quieter than they had ever been. No more grand declarations. No more illusions of golden children. Jenna began therapy. She called me often, sometimes to cry, sometimes just to sit in silence on the phone. She finally understood why I stopped letting our parents speak for me. As for me, I learned something I should have realized long ago. Telling the truth isn't betrayal. Hiding it is. And families built on denial always collapse eventually. If you've ever stood alone at a table full of people who claim to love you, tell me, where are you listening from? And after hearing my story, what would you have done?